Before 1914, British trade unions were already a significant force. They had grown in numbers and influence, particularly in key industries like coal mining, railways and cotton. However, they were often fragmented, with many different unions representing various crafts and grades of worker, sometimes even within the same workplace. The years leading up to the First World War had seen considerable industrial unrest, known as the Great Unrest, with major strikes occurring as workers sought better pay and conditions in a period of rising prices. This period established a pattern of industrial action that would echo in the years to come, setting the stage for future confrontations and negotiations between labour and capital. The outbreak of war in August 1914 brought an initial wave of patriotic unity. Many trade union leaders and members supported the war effort, believing it was a necessary fight against German aggression. The government quickly realized that winning a modern industrialized war required the full cooperation of the workforce. This meant engaging with the trade unions as never before. Production of munitions, ships and other essential war materials was paramount. The unions, for their part, largely agreed to suspend restrictive practices and avoid strikes for the duration of the conflict, a significant concession that demonstrated their commitment to the national cause, though underlying tensions remained. During the war, trade union membership actually increased significantly. This was partly due to the government's encouragement of collective bargaining to maintain industrial peace and production. The Treasury Agreement of 1915, for instance, saw unions agree to compulsory arbitration and the suspension of strikes in return for government promises to limit war profits and restore pre-war practices afterwards. However, the war also brought challenges like dilution, where less skilled workers, including many women, were brought into jobs previously done by skilled men. This led to the rise of the shop stewards movement, particularly in engineering, which often took a more militant stance than the national union leadership, reflecting workplace frustrations. The immediate aftermath of the war, from late 1918 into 1920, witnessed a brief but intense economic boom. Industries rushed to meet pent-up civilian demand and to rebuild. Trade union membership reached a peak, with over 8 million members by 1920. Workers, having made significant sacrifices during the war, had high expectations for a land fit for heroes, as promised by politicians. They sought improved wages, shorter hours, and better working conditions. This period was marked by considerable industrial militancy, as unions pressed their claims, buoyed by their strong bargaining position in a time of labour shortage and apparent prosperity, though this economic sunshine was not to last very long. The First World War placed immense strain on the established political order, particularly the Liberal Party. The Liberals, traditionally advocates of free trade, limited government intervention and individual liberty, found themselves presiding over a state that increasingly controlled many aspects of economic and social life. Issues like military conscription, introduced in 1916, and the extensive wartime economic regulations were deeply divisive within the party. The demands of total war fundamentally challenged core liberal principles, creating internal rifts that proved difficult to heal and ultimately contributed to their long-term decline from preeminence in British politics. The internal divisions within the Liberal Party were exacerbated by leadership struggles. In December 1916, Herbert Asquith was replaced as Prime Minister by David Lloyd George, who formed a coalition government heavily reliant on Conservative support. This split the Liberal Party into factions loyal to Asquith and those supporting Lloyd George. While Lloyd George was seen by many as the dynamic leader needed to win the war, his actions further fractured the Liberal base. The coupon election of 1918, where coalition candidates received a letter of endorsement, cemented these divisions, leaving the Liberals weakened and unable to reclaim their former dominance in the post-war political landscape. While the Liberals fractured, the Labour Party found its position strengthened by the war. Its leaders gained valuable experience in government through participation in the wartime coalitions. The war also demonstrated the crucial role of organised labour in the national effort, giving the party and its associated trade unions greater legitimacy and influence. Crucially, the Representation of the People Act 1918 tripled the electorate, enfranchising all men over 21 and, for the first time, women over 30 who met property qualifications. This expansion of the franchise significantly benefited Labour, as many newly enfranchised working-class voters were drawn to its platform. In the post-war elections, particularly from 1922 onwards, the Labour Party rapidly overtook the Liberals to become the main opposition to the Conservatives. It formed its first minority government in 1924 under Ramsay MacDonald. For the trade unions, the rise of Labour was a momentous development. They increasingly saw the Labour Party as their natural political ally, the parliamentary wing of the Labour movement. This symbiotic relationship, where unions provided financial and organisational support to Labour, and Labour in turn advocated for workers' rights in Parliament, became a defining feature of British politics for much of the 20th century. The brief post-war economic boom quickly gave way to a severe slump by 1921. Britain's staple industries, coal, cotton, textiles, shipbuilding and iron and steel, which had been the backbone of its 19th century industrial supremacy, faced a harsh new reality. During the war, overseas competitors, particularly the United States and Japan, had expanded their own industrial capacity to fill the gap left by Britain's focus on war production. Furthermore, new technologies and changing patterns of global demand meant that British goods were often more expensive and less competitive in international markets, leading to a structural decline in these vital sectors. The economic consequences of this industrial decline were devastating. Factories closed, shipyards lay idle, and coal mines reduced production or shut down altogether. This resulted in mass unemployment, a problem that would plague Britain throughout the interwar period. Unemployment rates, especially in the older industrial regions of South Wales, the north of England and central Scotland, soared to unprecedented levels. For millions of working-class families, this meant poverty, hardship, and a desperate search for work in an economy that seemed to offer few prospects. The social fabric of entire communities built around these industries began to fray under the strain. The impact on trade union membership was significant, though complex. After reaching a peak in 1920, overall union density began to fall as unemployment rose and industries contracted. Workers in declining sectors found their bargaining power severely weakened. Employers, facing reduced profits and intense competition, sought to cut wages and lengthen working hours, leading to increased industrial tension. Despite the fall in overall numbers, unions in certain sectors, particularly mining, remained strong and militant, determined to resist the erosion of their members' living standards and working conditions, creating a volatile industrial relations climate. The response from workers and their unions to these harsh economic conditions was often one of fierce resistance. Frustration and anger grew as living standards deteriorated and the promise of a better post-war world failed to materialize for many. There were numerous local and national disputes as workers fought to defend their pay packets and jobs. This period saw a deepening sense of class consciousness and a growing belief among many workers that the existing economic system was failing them. This sentiment fueled industrial militancy and created the conditions for larger confrontations, as the underlying economic problems showed no signs of quick resolution. The early 1920s were punctuated by a series of major industrial disputes as employers attempted to roll back wartime gains made by Labour. A key moment was Black Friday in April 1921, when the leaders of the transport and railway unions decided not to support a national miners' strike against wage cuts. This was seen as a betrayal by the miners and a significant setback for the principle of Triple Alliance solidarity. Despite this, the miners continued to face repeated attempts to reduce their wages and worsen their conditions, reflecting the severe economic pressures on the coal industry, which was the lifeblood of many communities. The simmering tensions culminated in the general strike of May 1926. The immediate cause was the government's and coal owners' insistence on wage reductions and longer working hours for miners, following the recommendations of the Samuel Commission, which the miners rejected. The Trades Union Congress, representing a broad swathe of British unions, called a sympathetic strike in support of the miners, bringing key industries like transport, printing and heavy industry to a standstill. It was an unprecedented display of worker solidarity, but one that the government, led by Stanley Baldwin, was well prepared to confront, having made extensive contingency plans. The general strike lasted for 9 days, before the TUC General Council called it off without securing any concessions for the miners, who fought on alone for several more months before being forced back to work on the employer's terms. The government used volunteers and the military to maintain essential services, and its firm stance, coupled with divisions within the union leadership, contributed to the strike's collapse. The aftermath was bitter. The government passed the Trade Disputes and Trade Unions Act 1927, which made sympathetic strikes illegal and restricted union political activities, representing a significant blow to the movement's power and reach. Despite the defeat of the general strike, the experience prompted a period of reorganization and strategic rethinking within the TUC and the broader trade union movement. There was a gradual shift away from large-scale confrontational industrial action towards more systematic negotiation and political engagement through the Labour Party. The TUC began to develop a more professional bureaucracy and sought to cultivate a more constructive relationship with employers and government where possible. While the strike was a tactical failure, it indelibly shaped the landscape of British industrial relations and contributed to the union's enduring, albeit evolving, social and political influence in the decades that followed, cementing their role in national life.